are certain interests one can acquire over a land or landed property. And one of them is the certificate of occupancy. Certificate of occupancy in Nigeria is the strongest legal interest one can have over a property, over a land or a landed property. And why it is so is because it is empowered by Section 1 and Section 9 of the Land Use Act that empowers or that vests all lands in the country or in the state on the state, and then the governor of the state now holds in trust for the citizens. And Section 9 that provides that the governor can now, through a certificate of occupancy, vest such interest in any citizen that applies to hold the said property for a period of 99 years. So why it is also termed so is because the presence of the certificate of occupancy over a land or a landed property automatically implies that that person has been given that land by the state. So every other competing interest or right over that property is subject to the holder of a certificate of occupancy. And that's why most times we advise our clients who have bought lands that are not covered by a certificate of occupancy to go register the said land to have a certificate of occupancy, so that in future if someone now comes to lay adverse claim over that property with the evidence of your certificate, that claim goes in abeyance. Automatically you recover your land, because the interest of the certificate of occupancy is the strongest legal interest anyone can have over a property or can have over a landed property in Nigeria. Second interest one can acquire over a land or a landed property is the leasehold interest. Now, unlike the certificate of occupancy, the leasehold interest gives you only possessory rights over the property. It does not give you outright ownership over the property. And in the leasehold interest, the term of years is fixed, and it is not less than 3 years. It's not less than 3 years, it's from 3 years and above. That's if the occupier of the property of course, in most cases, he would have to pay for occupying the property. He pays for not less than 3 years, because that is a leasehold interest. And the parties in a leasehold agreement is the lessee, who is the owner of the property and who has reversionary rights. That's because he's the owner. At the end of the lease period, he takes back his property. So he has reversionary rights over the property. Property reverts back to him. He is the lessor, while the occupier of the property, the person who pays to occupy the property, is called the lessee. That's for a leasehold interest. And in a transaction concerning a leasehold agreement, it is usually advisable under the law that the legal practitioner to the lessor prepares the agreement that covers the transaction. This is because the lessor in this instance retains his ownership. He's the one who, if anything happens to the property, he would lose. So it is him that he should engage the service of his legal practitioner to prepare the requisite agreement covering the lease transaction. Now, as against the leasehold interest, another interest one can acquire over a property which is prevalent in Nigeria is the tenancy interest. The tenancy interest. Now, this interest is similar to the leasehold interest because it is for a term of years, and it also grants possessory rights. The difference is that, unlike the leasehold interest, the term of years does not exceed 3 years. It is either 1 year or 2 years. It does not exceed 3 years. And the parties in this transaction is the landlord and the tenant. It is usually the landlord that retains reversionary interest, meaning that the property reverts back to the landlord, who is the owner of the property, and then the tenant is the occupier who pays to use the property for a fixed term of years. Usually, in most cases, people um, give out or rent out their properties for not for usually 1 year. So that's for tenancy, which is similar to the leasehold. It's just that the term of years is shorter in terms of tenancy arrangement. And then another right um, one can acquire over land or a landed property. This particular right is it happens in Nigeria, but a lot of people do not put it down in writing, okay? And that is the easement. Easement. Easement is granting one right of way, over your property. Maybe you allow the person to always come to fetch water, you allow the person to always come to your land to fetch firewood, you allow the person to always come to your land to harvest a particular crop. These things should be documented, but in most cases, especially in Nigeria, people don't put it down. These things should be documented as to the terms and conditions, how long this should happen, what should happen when you enter the property, under the easement agreement, how long should you stay, certain terms and conditions should be spelled out, but people just do it and, without putting it down. But it's also a right. The right of easement is the right of way. One can have access. It's not possessory right. It's just a right that gives you access to the land or to the landed property. Now, another interest one can acquire over a property is the mortgage interest. Now, like the leasehold interest and the certificate of occupancy interest, this mortgage interest is a registrable interest under the Land Use Act, as it is recognized by the Land Use Act as a registrable interest. But unlike the others, this particular interest is based on a contingency. Now, what I mean is that this interest arises as a result of one borrowing money and using his land as security for the loan. One taking a loan and using his land as security for the loan. Now, in this particular transaction, the person who has the legal right over the property in that instance is the mortgagee, that is the lender of the loan. The lender of the loan is the mortgagee, and he is the one that will suffer loss if the loan is not paid. Okay, so based on that, it is his legal practitioner that will draft the mortgage arrangement or the mortgage agreement between both parties, because in the long run he is the one that the property will revert to if the mortgagor fails to pay or repay the loan. So that is why the mortgagee would engage the service of his legal practitioner to draft the mortgage agreement to make sure that his interest is protected adequately. Now, because I don't want this video to be very long, I would have to do a part 2 of ways one can acquire interest in land in Nigeria. I hope you found this video helpful. Please help me share to everyone you think will need it, and don't forget to also give us a thumbs up. Thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the rest of your day.